Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Monday, October 13th, 2025. On Mondays, we talk about mathematics and statistics. And this particular Monday, it's Thanksgiving here in Canada. So happy Thanksgiving, one and all. If you're down in the States, hope you're back at work. In any event, this week we're talking about tribalism. And I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent today, the mathematics or statistics side, just a couple of stats really. But I want to talk about dog bites. You'll see the connection, I think, in a moment. But have you ever been bitten by a dog? I mean, a serious bite, and not playfully, but the classic dog bite. You know, when the dog's upset or it's frightened or defending its territory or what have you. But if you have, you're certainly not alone. So it's estimated that upward of 5 million people are bitten each year just in the United States alone, or between 1 and 2% of the entire population. And almost a million of those cases are serious enough to require some medical attention. So as for myself, well, I love animals, and that certainly includes dogs, even though I've been bitten myself 5 times over the course of my lifetime. The first was actually a bit traumatic. I was about 4 years old, and a neighbor's dog chased me off their property. But unfortunately for me, it caught me, and it bit me in the calf, and still have that scar, actually. And then one was just a nip on the foot while riding a bike, so that didn't really do any damage. And once I was doing landscaping at somebody's house and I needed to turn on the hose, and they had a dog asleep by the faucet, and I asked the owner if she'd mind if I reached over to turn on the water. She said, sure, it wouldn't be a problem. And so, except that as I leaned over, the dog abruptly woke up and lunged at my face and just got a couple of teeth marks right just above my lip on either side of my upper lip. So, and obviously I drew back immediately, and that was it. The owner came and grabbed the dog, etc. The worst, though, was actually when I was 12. It was a summer's night. I was at a friend's house, and we were just laying on the grass on his lawn, looking up at the stars. It's the kind of thing that we like to do in the summertime. And anyway, his German Shepherd came walking up, and normally it's a fairly friendly dog, but we didn't know at the time that it had eaten rat poisoning. So long story short, I was lying on my back. The dog came walking up where we were laying. I was looking up at stars, etc. And then as I raised my arm to give him a scratch on the side of his head, he just suddenly lunged at me. And so instinctively, I put my arm over my neck, my face and neck, and to kind of block him. And he was actually able, I don't know if you can see this, he was actually able to get me right there quite nicely. Again, it took a big chunk out of the back of my arm. So yeah, that's the biggest scar from a dog bite that I have. And then the last time I was bit was actually almost 40 years ago. I was out for a run. I was in grad school at the time. I was passing a woman who was walking her dog on the sidewalk. So I kind of moved to the street. It was only maybe 5 feet, but the dog still managed to jump at me as I strode by. And he caught me directly on the thigh, and I actually needed a few stitches for that one. Not much of a scar there, but nonetheless. And so, yeah, I do still love dogs, and pretty much kind of all animals in general. And then growing up, I loved the comic strip Peanuts, and Snoopy was my favorite dog of all. So this, if you can see this, that's this is my Snoopy T-shirt. And so I never held the attacks against the dogs, right? That's their instinct. They're often a tribal animal in nature. And like when we speak of a pack of wolves, and after all, dogs and wolves are both members of the same genus, Canis, right? So that's why we talk about canines. And while humans have domesticated dogs, obviously, for a long time, in our culture, most have 1 or 2 dogs at most, rather than a whole pack of dogs. And even the domesticated dogs can be quite territorial, if not so much tribal, in living with their owners. To be sure, obviously, a great many are incredibly friendly, and no less an animal expert than Jane Goodall, who I've been talking a lot about these days, once declared that she declared that dogs were her favorite animal, especially because of their unconditional love. She said she loved them even more than the chimpanzees that she studied. And so, in fact, I'd also basically describe myself as mainly a dog person throughout most of my life. So, obviously, the dog bites didn't sour me on the species, and I didn't really develop any kind of a fear or phobia about dogs. I just learned to be a bit more careful, obviously, over the years, and certainly to try not to provoke the dogs that seemed a little bit restless or shy or defensive or whatever. Anyway, so then I was out for my long Sunday run yesterday, dribbling my basketball as per usual. Beautiful day in London, Ontario. Temperature is about 18 degrees Celsius. It's about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And towards the end of the run, I saw a couple of, two people, and they were walking, they each had a dog. They were walking their two dogs side by side on the sidewalk. And I was coming up behind them, dribbling, making noise, obviously. So I still didn't want to startle them, and the dogs in particular. So I moved to the left, onto a bike path, which was next to the sidewalk. So you had the sidewalk. I moved to the left onto the bike path, and then there was the street, the roadway. So as I ran by, though, the bigger of the two dogs, even though, again, I was about 5-6 feet away, the bigger of the two dogs lunged at me as the leash extended. And I actually jumped and basically ended up almost in the road. So just for a moment, I had that flash, that feeling of fear that gripped me that I can recall so well. And I was actually more stunned by my own personal reaction more than anything else. So I didn't get bit, but it was the feelings and that momentary fear of being under attack by a dog. And that returned, however fleetingly. There's an old expression that's quite well known these days, and a whole book, in fact, in folk wisdom around the idea that captures in part what I experienced today, and that is the body keeps the score. Or if you like, the body remembers. Or perhaps in this case, maybe a combination of cognitive and bodily memories. And so thankfully, most of us then can process these bad experiences or even traumas that we might have experienced. And we manage to live quite successfully and healthy and happy lives. And we don't necessarily suffer from PTSD or other afflictions. But some people, unfortunately, do experience quite serious traumas, and clearly from much more than dog attacks, depending on the circumstances. As many as between 5 and 10% of the populations of Canada and the United States combined suffer from some manifestation of PTSD. And most of the result of traumas that were experienced quite often at the hands of other human beings, ranging from instances of domestic violence to actually living in war zones. Now, again, we've thankfully not been exposed to that so much on our soils here in Canada and the US, but many parts of the world, as you well know, do have active conflicts or wars. And the civilians are often the collateral damage, as it's so often described in the news. But like the dog's occasional reactions, you could even suggest then that we too as humans are often tribal or territorial in nature, and sometimes quite literally willing to bite in the heat of the battle or a conflict, or a boxing match if you're Mike Tyson and losing to Evander Holyfield. Or then there's that old viral video clip, do you remember, from back in 2007? Charlie bit my finger, that sort of thing. By the way, no biting was actually one of the foundational rules of UFC when they got that kick-started back in the early 1990s, back in the early days. No biting and no eye gouging. And then they added a bunch more rules to protect the fighters as well. Okay, so that's it for today's vlog, short and sweet. And until next time, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs, not bites, in abundance. Peace.